Hey everyone, I'm Josh from Memoirs of World War II, and today we're doing something a little different. We decided to take some family time off for the holidays, so we don't have a new episode for January. Instead, I'm going to give you some behind-the-scenes information on our episode number 24, Our Worst Mission. Over the past few years, I've been traveling all over the country, recording interviews with the last living veterans of the Second World War. Now, I'm going to let you hear a little more about what goes into creating the documentaries for our series, Memoirs of World War II. I hope you enjoy.
I found out way after the mission.
So this is our cold open. I always like to start with, a clip from later on in the episode, something to, like a little teaser to grab the attention. But I always want to make sure that it pays off. I don't ever want to make things look better than they're going to be. So I always try to be as truthful as I can with, this is something that you're going to see pay off later on in the episode. And this music track is called They Didn't Believe Me by Artie Shaw. It's recorded, I believe, back in the 1940s. I always like to, if I can, if it works with the story, I like to start off with a period piece of music to really set the stage, for the vibe of what it was like back in the 40s. What kind of music would they have been listening to?
Could make decisions.
And that's Leon Waldman. We met him in Los Angeles. We were out there last year, back in 2019, summer of 2019. And for whatever reason, it seems like there's a lot of Army Air Force World War II veterans out there in California. Of the, I believe, 7 interviews that we did when we were in LA, 5 of them were Army Air Force.
You don't know where you're going. And where do I wind up in the middle of November? Miami Beach.
And this map here is a kind of a homage to Indiana Jones. Leon had so many details about all the different places that he went for training. It seems like Air Force veterans, they did go to a lot of different places to train, did a lot of different kinds of training. And the way that he told it was almost humorous. I went here, and then we went here and did this training, and then I went here, and then I had to go over here. And so I thought it would be interesting and kind of fun to visually show that and also do a little throwback to Indiana Jones, which I love. So I got to work in After Effects. That was some very basic stuff I learned how to do in After Effects for that for this map thing. So, and that is just about all I know of After Effects.
Excellent trainer. But the first day was the first time I was ever in an airplane. And the plane's bouncing, and I got airsick. So I stick my head out, but I face forward. And I throw up all over me. That's how smart we were at 19.
It's always nice when the veterans that we interview have such a big personality. No matter what kind of personality that is, it just brings a vibrance to the story, and it really makes the difference between what you can learn about World War II in a textbook and what you can learn about World War II from a person who was actually there. And everybody's personality is different, but what I love about Leon is that he just has such a dry sense of humor about a lot of the stuff that he experienced. And it just kind of really paints a different kind of color on the story of World War II, coming from the perspective of somebody like Leon.
Oh, and they said, you better take good care of these planes. They cost $250,000. And we said, wow, that much.
Equipped with brand new B-17 Flying Fortresses, Leon and the 483rd Bomb Group were on their way to Italy to join the rest of the 15th Air Force as they fought to stop the spread of German forces throughout Europe. But when the 483rd arrived, they were met with a rude awakening.
So they sent us up to double up with another bomb group that had been there a long time, the 99th. And those dirty guys took our shiny bombers away. We thought they were ours. They took 72
dirty
new
guys.
planes away from us and gave us this beat-up old Bad Penny up there with 100 missions on it when we got it.
I love that, Bad Penny.
100 missions.
You can't make that up. The perfect name for like a junker B-17 that's been handed down to you that you got to go into combat with.
12th, but it was
This music track is called Wonder. It's written by Tristan Barton.
a cement factory.
We get a lot of our music tracks from Artlist. It's a website where you can get royalty-free music to use for videos or whatever, and they have a lot of great artists on there.
Well, the next mission, the guy I knew pretty well, he was on another crew. Boom, they hit him in the wing. They hit him with the 88 in the wing, which blows up the gas tanks, and the plane just disintegrates. Nobody lives through that. So I thought, boy, that could get hurt on this job. That's pretty tough, you know.
It's interesting that Leon brought that up, because I've noticed that it seems like World War II airmen have a tendency to feel sort of disconnected from the war, because they're flying at such high altitudes, dropping bombs thousands of feet below them. It's not like someone in the infantry or the Marines that sees the combat like right in front of their face. For the most part, you know, they're flying way up in the sky, and everything's kind of far away until, you know, they get into a combat situation or something like that. But it's interesting that he brought that up, because it does seem like, you know, there's a little bit of a disconnect until like what happened with Leon, where, you know, someone that he knew was shot down and killed, and then all of a sudden it became much more real and much more personal to him.
But in a moment of frustration and flared tempers, Leon threatened a superior officer, resulting in being grounded from one of the most significant missions in the war.
My co-pilot, I didn't like the co-pilot. I was stupid, and I told him, don't go near the bomb bay on the next mission. So he reported me, and I guess it went up to the squadron commander. So instead of court-martialing me, he took me off that mission. That was my punishment. It turned out to be June 2nd to June 11th, 9 days.
Listen to this.
Well, what does June 2nd to June 11th tell you? It was D-Day.
I'm going to pause that right there. So, what does June 2nd to June 11th tell you? It was D-Day. That took some editing on my end. Again, we filmed this in Los Angeles, and the day that we filmed this was the first day that we got there. We had just gotten off the plane, and we did 5 interviews in one day. Now, if you've ever been to Los Angeles before, you know that it takes a long time to drive from one end of the city to the other. And so we had 5 interviews all over the place in Los Angeles. And so Leon was the last interview that we did that day, and it was probably 9 p.m. We'd been driving around all day, so we were exhausted, and we're sitting in his nice cozy office. The lights were dim, you know, and I am doing everything that I can to stay not only awake but engaged, you know, in this conversation that I'm having with him. I want to do a good interview, but the elements were against me. And so when he asked me, what does June 2nd to June 11th tell you? My mind was blank. And anyone who might, you know even a little bit about World War II can tell you that on June 6th, 1944 was D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. And he asked me, what does June 2nd to June 11th tell you? And I was dumbfounded. I wasn't following where he was going. And he says,
it was D-Day, June 6th.
Almost so disappointed in me, because he's got to be thinking, this guy came all the way across the country, says he interviews World War II veterans, and he doesn't even know when D-Day happened. Obviously, I edited it so that you couldn't hear me being a moron in the background, but every time he shouts,
it was D-Day,
it cracks me up and just reminds me how very tired I was and how very foolish I probably looked to him.
The Allied invasion of the French coast was the first step in bringing the war to Germany in an unprecedented way. But for the largest seaborne invasion in history to be a success, it would require a multitude of diversions to keep the German full strength from defending the coast. The bombing missions of the 483rd would do just that.
They flew.
So I had another opportunity here to bring our Indiana Jones map back. This time, though, you know, I feel like it really helped to clarify the mission that he's talking about. So it's kind of cool. I didn't plan on it, but when we got to this part of the edit, I thought, oh, let's bring that map back, and that'll be a nice little cool callback.
Magazines or radios. You know, D-Day meant nothing to us. Oh yeah, heard about they landed in Normandy. Well, good. When do we go home?
Again, love his perspective, his sense of humor about it.
and the tide began to turn.
To all of us,
on the
D-Day
Allied
is such a
paper.
big thing, but to him, he was just like, well, it sounds good. They landed in Normandy. Great. I want to go home.
We lost 79 planes in the time we were.
This music track is called A Glimmer of Hope by Michael Vignola, also an Artlist track.
Everybody was lost, except those that could jump out, you know.
Come on, you guys, get out of that plane. There's one. He come out of the bomb bay.
You hear the audio clip there of the pilot talking over the intercom. And, you know, anytime we get the opportunity to add in something that makes you feel like you're there, I like to take it. You know, if it's sound effects or you know, audio clips like that, I think that's great because it just draws us in that much more. And I want to do everything that I can to kind of put you in Leon's shoes so that we can all have a better understanding of what it was like for these guys.
Two of the groups didn't like the weather over the Adriatic and turned around and went home. And two other groups went to an alternate target, and the fighters didn't go with us. And then by that time, the Germans got us spotted. Hey, a group of 26 dumb, happy B-17s all by themselves. So every plane in southwest Germany got the word to get up there. And I look out there and I say, wow, a flock of birds. Coming closer and you could see their airplanes. And the next thing I hear, everybody's shooting and planes are going down. The first squadron of 7 planes went down in about 2 or 3 minutes, all of them. And then they started on the other 2. They got 14 out of 26 of us. So 14 planes went down with 143 guys.
It's amazing the amount of detail that these guys can remember 75 years after these events happened. I mean, I imagine if I had been through anything remotely like this, you know, as monumental or traumatic, that I probably could recall a lot of the details too, but it's just amazing. You know, it's 75 years ago, and some of these stories go back even further than that, and they can still recall those details.
We got back and landed, and I could see a 20-millimeter shell.
I love that shot there. The guy pointing at the hole in the wing, he kind of looks like a younger version of Leon. And we get questions a lot about the archive footage that we're showing. Is that actually the veteran that we're interviewing? And no, it's not. It would be pretty much impossible to find unless the veteran actually carried a camera with them. Which, unless they were like a combat cameraman, they wouldn't have done that. It would be impossible to actually find footage of that individual from the war. But what we do is we get footage that is the same kind of thing that they're talking about, and we always do our best to historically match it correctly. The different planes and vehicles or weapons that they're talking about, we always do our best to make sure that it's accurate. And we get really lucky sometimes, like with that shot of Leon earlier, it looked like him. Sometimes we just find like, that's exactly what I was looking for.
And just like that, Leon's service in the war came to an end. "75 years later, Leon's memories of the Second World War are clear as ever. The missions he flew and the crew he served with.
You know, I was always looking for an emotional ending, to all of these videos to give us something to think about when it's over. And when we did this interview, there wasn't really anything that stuck out to me, like, oh, that's a great ending. But then when I watched through it again, and I realized he was naming off all the guys that he served with that were on his crew that aren't alive anymore. And it's just, that is as powerful as anything, the fact that like these guys are fading so quickly and that he's the only one left from his crew. It's a big moment. Well, hey, before we close this out, we asked the amazing people that support us through Patreon to send us in some questions that they might have had about the episode. So we're going to go through those right now. And if you'd like to send in some questions about the episode, or if you'd like to see some of the other benefits that we have for those who support us through Patreon, check out our Patreon page in the link below. We literally could not do this without our Patreon supporters. All right, Nick and Diana asked, what type of training did you go through to be able to perform your assignments? Not really any formal training. Everything that I do for Memoirs of World War II, I just kind of learned as I went along. I started interviewing World War II veterans a couple years before we started this YouTube channel, so I definitely had a lot of trial and error when it came to learning how to conduct a good interview, and I'm still learning. Editing and all that stuff, I just kind of picked it up as I went along. I have a great friend, Christian McLean, who has been our editor from the beginning. He's shown me a lot of stuff, and since the last couple years, I've actually taken on a lot of that editing. I'm still learning as I go, but just always trying to do the best that I can, and with each episode, trying to get a little better and better. John and Melissa Robinson asked, Leon mentioned that he had fighter escorts on one of his missions. How often did fighters escort the bombers? Well, I believe it was more common earlier in the war, in the US involvement in the war, for fighters to escort the bombers because the German Luftwaffe was still in effect and very strong. And so the escorts would go up with the bombers to protect them from German fighter planes that would come in and try to take the bombers down. But as the war progressed, the need for a fighter escort became less and less because the German Luftwaffe was running out of pilots, running out of fuel, and so they weren't as big of a threat as they were earlier in the war. So occasionally it would be safer for the bombers to go on a mission without escort. John S. Dunlop asked, where do you find the music for these episodes, and do you have any copyright issues to deal with? No, because the majority of the music that we get is from a website called Artlist.io. The whole reason why they exist is you can purchase a subscription with them, and that gives you access to royalty-free music that you can use for videos like this. Some of our music is original compositions that I wrote and recorded. I also like to use songs from back during the 1940s, 1930s, or 40s to kind of set the tone for the time period, but we always try to make sure that it's okay to be used. And finally, Epic Dabble asked, how long does it take to go through old footage and decide what should be used? It takes hours. It's definitely one of the longest processes in putting these videos together, but the more that I've done them, I kind of am starting to learn the library of footage that I have. If we're doing an episode about a Marine in the Pacific Theater, I know that I'm not going to open up a film that has a lot of European theater bombing missions. For an episode like this with Leon Waldman, I know that I'm looking for a lot of footage with B-17s. It's an ongoing process, and it does take a while to find the footage that we want, but I always try to do my best because I know that that helps tell the story if we can get the historical depictions as close to right as possible. So again, thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and check out our Patreon page and consider supporting us on there. It's literally the way that we get to keep doing what we're doing. You can check out our channel for more amazing veteran stories, and our next episode is coming the first Friday of February, so we will see you then.